light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Hu. Today I wanted to offer a few reflections on ideas of home and family. It seems that these are foundational to every person's individual sense of identity, and in some cases exaggerated to the point that they forget that they are an individual in the midst of such contexts. There's something about having those, though, that helps us to know who we are, and yet when we don't have those, I don't want to make the assertion in any way. I don't want to imply that not having those means that we are somehow doomed as creatures. If someone grows up as an orphan through whatever confusing set of circumstances, there needs to be a process of healing by which they can still learn how to be family to someone. And if someone grows up homeless and not knowing any sense of stability or safety or security, to, at a later point in life, still be able to develop those grantedly unfamiliar things so that life can be better than it ever has been, instead of assuming that the definition of life does not include those things. For some people, it hasn't included those things. It doesn't mean that it won't include those things. But holding on to that hope and having faith in those greater possibilities that you've never even seen, where does one even begin to create that? Or is that a gift that we can kind of sort of give to each other? In some ways, it's a gift that those who are our true family are able to give to each other. That someone says, you belong here. I value you. I will do whatever I can to make life work for you. And yet at the same time as we're doing that, coming to an awareness that they need those things just as much as we do. And consequently, that if we love someone in return, or if we love someone who doesn't love us in return, but we love them, it's about extending ourselves for that person in whatever ways we are able, even as we allow them to extend that same sort of nurturing toward us. Home is a place of formation, but it is a place where people, imperfect people, are in such close proximity that, like a room full of porcupines, it's difficult to avoid pricking each other with our quills. It takes a certain choreography, a certain planning, a certain coordination to find out how so many unique personalities with unique sharp edges and unique soft spots can share the same space and do it without resenting each other. And even to do it in a way that begins to nurture each other. And then to add further challenge to it, to perhaps even make it multi-generational. That whether it's within one's own home or whether it's people one sees frequently, there is a sense of wisdom and understanding and determination, passing like a baton from one generation to the next. That because somebody has been through this in some slightly different way, but something similar in the past, we know that this horrible threat, whatever it may be, is not going to wipe us out, is not going to keep us from finding our way, from being able to survive. It seems to me that in situations whenever there's a tornado, a hurricane, a major disaster of some sort, maybe a house burns down, but it's more so the regional disasters, when it's everybody in a town who is trying to recover from war or from a tornado or from a flood, that for a few days at least, people remember that all the details don't matter. Which church you go to, what race you are, what religion you are, young or old, who your relatives are, where you came from, it doesn't matter. It's all about everyone working together to rebuild, to clean up, to search the debris and find the survivors. It's about working together and being family to each other in ways that it seems only the worst of disasters will bring out in people. And in that, to come to a definition of family that transcends the experiential one each of us develops in childhood. There's a sense in which the circumstances and the dynamics that we experience throughout childhood become each individual's definition of normal. And then we spend the rest of our lives trying to rewrite the definitions, to understand ways in which what was normal for us, first of all, may not be normal for anyone else, but it may not even be a truly healthy normal. At one time, many families included domestic violence, and seeing it growing up, it would be easy for children to think that that's simply how adults interact. And then getting to an age where they find out that no, domestic violence is not normal. It's not necessary. It's not to be tolerated. Just because daddy used to beat mommy does not mean that a future husband is expected to beat a daughter when she becomes a wife. To instead find a healthier way of being, a way of rewriting the definition of normal, rewriting the definition of normal behavior in our towns, in our families, in our relationships. That we allow for people being in process. We allow for people learning what is the right way to do it, or what is one of the right ways. That there are in fact many right ways to do many things, many right ways to do almost everything. I'm not sure who said it first or where I learned it, but somehow in childhood I often found myself saying there are 100 ways to do anything. As long as you find one that works, that's what matters. And so I would try to allow people to find their own ways to get solutions, to manifest solutions. At various times in childhood, for example, I built a number of tree houses. The sort of tree house you could build in any particular tree depended upon where the branches were. You could not replicate one tree house from one tree to another, because in this particular tree, the tree house depended upon having the branches in that sort of configuration. And the boards would go between a particular two branches. And there was a particular path up through the branches by which you would climb to that platform. Another tree didn't have the same branches, couldn't have the ladder in the same position, couldn't have the platform in the same position. Every design had to be tailored to the individual tree. And no two trees were identical, were exactly the same. Taking that pattern to other things, it became clear to me that if you put the same challenge in front of 5 different people and they weren't allowed to watch each other, in all likelihood, all 5 of them would create 5 completely unique ways of solving the problem. None of which was any more right or wrong than any other one, as long as they all worked. A phenomena in the midst of all that kind of really blurred the lines between family and home, but was always extremely challenging because conversations became sometimes minefields, with, not sure when an argument would happen or when somebody would blow up over this or that, but sometimes a fascinating, chaotic convergence. The family reunion. Somebody would announce there was going to be a family reunion. They would decide whose home it was going to be at, and everyone else would come from their own homes to this home. And for one day, you would have all these people converging, some of whom you've never met before, all with their various imperfections, all with their opinions about the right way to set up a buffet table and whether we should eat outdoors or indoors, whether the children should be at a separate table from the adults, what activities should happen in the house and what activities need to be restricted to outside. All sorts of different standards. And of course, in the midst of all that, in every family tree, there was somebody who was very intellectually liberally minded, open to absolutely any possibility, and yeah, that's okay, and that's okay, and that's okay. And on the other hand, you would have somebody who was very, very conservative, who didn't like people of particular races, particular religions, didn't like particular occupations, and somewhere in between all of these confusing perspectives would stand the children trying to make sense of who they are and who they need to be and which friendships to maintain, which cousins to play with. There was always some relative who, because he had extreme opinions and was kind of an embodiment of the old witticism, I've made up my mind, don't confuse me with the facts. It wasn't about having a debate, it wasn't about creating an argument, it was about respecting the fact that that is what that person believed, and that it wasn't going to change, and you were only going to see each other for a day, so there wasn't enough time to have an extended conversation about it. Maybe if you lived right next door to each other and you talked about it back and forth for 6 months, opinions would start to blend a little bit. But for 1 day time, there was no changing anyone's opinion. It was simply throwing all the diversity of humanity under one roof and trying to see if you could get through the day without anybody resorting to an actual fight. The challenge in that is deciding how, depending, of course, upon how close to open violence any particular family comes, or any family reunion comes, deciding whether or not this is a family to which to remain faithful, or whether this is a family from which to separate. Because there have been times where separation from a family is in everyone's best interest. And quite a number of people have assured me over the years that nothing improves relationships more than putting a little distance between you. That when you see relatives once a year, and in some ways it's the old saying, absence makes the heart grow fonder. It's like saying, if I only have to see you 3 hours out of the year, we can be friends and we can smile and we can hug each other and everything's fine. And then we go home to our separate residences and go back to our respective ways of living, instead of the shared one that really wasn't truly either one of us. The sense of home that one needs to create then, if one wants the loving and wise environment that will truly nurture life, is that within which each person can be themselves. I grew up having to share a bedroom with my brother, and there were more than a few days, with one of my brothers, and there were more than a few days where we would designate a particular line in the wooden floor as the dividing line that we were not allowed to cross except for going in and out of the room. Because it had gotten to such a point that that was his side, he could do whatever he wanted over there, and this was my side, I would do whatever I wanted on my side of the line. But only by creating a boundary between the two, real or imagined, or somewhere somewhat between the two. I mean, a line in the floor is not exactly a boundary, but it is something that indicates a point in space. By having such boundaries, we were able to maintain a semblance of peace. Because such boundaries even became necessary, there were a lot of things we never shared, and a lot of ways that our lives were not nurturing to each other. And when the time came, it was in everyone's best interest to let go and go to our separate worlds. instead of attempting to maintain an artificial bridge across the line. To say, thank you, we got through this, it's time to let go. And that is the wisest and most loving thing to do. In other cases, a lot of people have said over time, opposites attract. I think opposites are fascinated with each other, and there is a sense in which opposites attract, the north and south poles of a magnet. And I don't want to make any firm statements one way or the other, though, because there are times when opposites do attract. And there's times when opposites are opposites because they will never be able to live in the same world. Which it is, in any particular case, only the two people can decide. There are ways that relationships can be complementary because of their oppositeness and because they're willing to take care of each other in ways that nobody else will. In my one long-term relationship at this point, we were together for 9 years, and he was the cook and I was the interior decorator. Now that we've separated, I have an empty refrigerator and he has a messy house. We were very complementary, and it's amusing in a way, but I know that we each tolerated things in the other that since that time nobody else will tolerate. And so we remained friends. We never had a final argument. We just got to the point where we couldn't live in each other's worlds anymore. The challenge of being family to each other is having the courage to be honest enough about what boundaries and divisions and separations are required. How much space does a particular flower need to grow? Maybe this one needs more space, maybe this one needs less space. Each one needs as much space as they need to become the person or flower that they are internally programmed to be. There is something about personality that I don't know that we've ever fully explained or come to terms with, that no matter what you do to a particular child, if they have a particular kind of personality, you can put them in any environment whatsoever, and their personality won't change. They will embrace that environment, they will address that environment, or engage that environment in ways that that personality prescribes or guides. One of the, in speaking with couples, for example, trying to get more concrete about this, in speaking with couples, there are, one of the things I try to encourage people to be aware of is the ways that they resolve challenges. I tend to be a person who wants to address them directly, calmly, promptly, but head on, let's deal with it. I have met other people who want to, kind of like an elephant in the living room, they know it's there, but they don't want to ignore it, they want to wait for it to go away on its own. Some problems will, some problems won't. The challenge of a family is that within a family you have these and many more different ways of dealing with problems. You have people who want to play possum and wait for a problem to go away on its own. You have people who want to say it's fine and adapt to it and integrate it and not try to change it or fix it, but simply enable it and allow it to be what it is. In some cases this is devastating. I first learned about the term enabler from reading about families dealing with alcoholism. That enablers are those who make excuses for the alcoholic and don't hold them accountable and allow, essentially they enable the problem to continue. Then you have people who empower the alcoholic to move out of that alcoholism. Then you have people who want to play possum or ignore the problem and not even recognize that it's there, or as some say, play elephant in the living room. Within any particular family, you will have all of these strategies and more. And the challenge of being family to each other is creating a nurturing environment together where each has their own place in their development, where each has their own way of engaging it, and yet creating a nurturing environment so that in their own ways and at their own pace, each person can continue to grow. And somehow finding some sort of ceasefire agreement or some sort of way of being together with sufficient mutual respect that these differences, these imperfections don't drive you apart while there's still important nurturing work that can be done. And having established a sense of family by whatever configuration, whether you have anything biologically in common or not, there are perfect strangers who have become family to each other simply by caring for one another, by being there and sharing the memories of triumphing over difficulties. By having those relationships to then move on to create a sense of genuine home, a place where each one feels safe, and that when someone is acting out or being afraid or anxious or responding in a hostile fashion, that on some level perhaps they don't feel safe. Perhaps their sense of home is missing. I recall the wonderful line from the movie Hook, allegedly about the story of Peter Pan, that if Peter Pan grew up and had kids, and there's a place in there where the daughter of the now grown Peter Pan explains to her father, Peter Pan, that the problem with Captain Hook is that, quote, he doesn't have a mommy. And that by not having that sort of nurturance in his life, it produced an out-of-balance person that didn't know love and gentleness, that knew only violence and tyranny. If families stay together, and if we are patient with each other's developmental process, over time it seems to me that each person will play all the roles. Regardless of gender, there will be moments when each person is called upon to nurture, when each person is called upon to lead, to organize, when each person is called upon to be a witness and a support to whatever is going on. And when all of the people involved together, there will be times where they simply need to join hands in an egalitarian fashion and march forward, dealing with whatever challenge is coming at them, recognizing that this is not something we could do on our own, that it is a symbiotic relationship, each one providing for the other what the other cannot provide for themselves, that by being together, the sum is greater than the parts. The group effort accomplishes things that none of the individuals could. In our modern world of communicating electronically and moving from place to place, perhaps too frequently, it is easy to forget how essential home and family are. But it could just also be, and I would invite all of you to consider this at much greater length, humanity may, in fact, be standing at the brink of a second renaissance in which the real invitation is to create a new sense of family and a new sense of home that is global in its scale, in its perspective. That it is finally time for all of us to work together to make the entire earth a sense of home for each and every family member within it. And that there may be too many of us to know each other by first name, but that somehow we will know in the depths of our hearts that all those people, whether we know their names or not, are our family. That we are family, that we come from a common source, that we have a common home, and that everyone matters. And because everyone matters, I am there for them, and they are there for me, and our greatest security is now and always in each other. I've said a lot of things in the last half hour, and I've probably rambled quite a bit. I thank you for watching. I hope it's been interesting and helpful to you. And I guess if I could just leave you with this final blessing, as I did in some of my first episodes of my television show many, many, many years ago. And now may you be blessed with love and peace in the pursuit of your own dreams and in all your dealings with the diversity of humanity around you. Amen.